So I just finished the first half of the install script for mycause.ai, and I did a reboot which enables the second half of the Windows Subsystem for Linux install procedure to finish. So this is something that pops up automatically right after a reboot. It's actually going to take a few minutes to get done. So I will sit here and talk to you while it's going on to have a full-length version of it so you can know exactly what to expect. The reboot was necessary because a feature called the hypervisor was turned on. It's a hardware level feature built into Intel processors. AMD has its own version of it, and it is hardware assisted virtualization so that multiple operating systems can run on the same computer at the same time without it having to be a multi-boot system that you would have to switch back and forth between different operating systems, rebooting every time. That's a major inconvenience, so Microsoft has gone through some considerable effort dating back quite a while, beginning with NT really, with their software level support for isolating separate operating systems on the same piece of hardware. That was quite a while ago. That was sometime in the 90s. And in the 2000s, the hardware people caught up with the software people and said, okay, let's make virtualization a primary feature of processors. So that all this multi-core stuff that was going on, you put in, 2 cores, 4 cores, 8 cores. Well, isn't it nice to be able to run separate computers as if they each had their own dedicated core? That is one of the ways this sort of technology is used. And the way Microsoft is using it now is in order to allow Linux to run at the very same time as Windows. You would hardly even know it the way they've implemented it. Here you see a full screen terminal. I can just throw that to the side for a minute. But Windows has all these different things like command prompt that you can pull up. It's one sort of terminal. You can see these little backslashes here. That's a very strong indication that it's a Microsoft style terminal. Real Unix or Linux has forward slashes. Another one that they have is called PowerShell. They usually give it a blue background screen. I guess it's not blue because of the way I installed terminal here. It's still the backslashes, but this is PowerShell as opposed to the command prompt. So I'm just showing you those because this is going on, and these tabs here is because of that Microsoft Terminal program that I installed. When I installed Terminal on the last video from out of the Microsoft Store, it is this unified terminal environment, so you can bring in different types of terminals all under one master interface. So there's PowerShell. I could bring up a PowerShell. Here's command prompt. So this is the same thing as I just did before, but now they're under different tabs here. And you can see one is already Ubuntu. It knows the install is going on, but I won't pull that up yet because the install isn't actually finished and I don't want to mess it up. And you might think I'm risking messing it up with all this messing around here, but that's part of the beauty of all of this, how wonderfully these separate things are isolated from each other, even if they're in tabs under the same user interface. I may end up editing this for the real version. All right, and it brings us to this point, And you really do want to finish through with this. I give it the very traditional Ubuntu name, UBUNTU, and just the password foo. And there we go. The operation has completed successfully. You're tempted to just close this, but you give it another second. You actually want to wait here long enough to see a Linux command prompt come back. And as opposed to DOS or PowerShell command prompts, which have the backslashes, you'll be able to recognize a Linux or Unix command prompt by its /. This is Linux, but the Linux operating system is very much modeled on the Unix operating system, so they're very similar. So there you have it. It's using my desktop name, which I'll want to fix to make it something prettier. But we can just close out of this, and now we can finish running our mycos script, not this one over again, but the Jupyter Ubuntu one. And what this does is it really replaces the Ubuntu that was just put on there with one which is hosting Jupyter notebooks from the Python side. There are many paths in life that will lead to dead ends. This isn't one. By installing the Linux version of JupyterLab on Windows, you are running the same code on your computer as you can on all Linux servers. From there, you ease your way into a lifetime of mindfulness and timeless skills by keeping a one text file journal in Vim for the rest of your life. As we live, we are always getting closer to the end of our lives, and there is precious little time to get sidetracked by short-lived trends and superficial tools. Marcus Aurelius gave us Stoicism, a philosophy for finding meaning and resilience in a chaotic world. mycos.ai RealOS, Marcus Aurelius, offers Toitism, a modern approach to finding value in life by focusing on mastering a few simple, lasting skills that can be carried with us from one context to the next. So this just basically shows the virtual machine concept, how you'll be accessing Python through a web browser, and it sets the stage for moving to Linux for real. How in the world can Stoicism apply to tech? Marcus Aurelius offers a way of using a Linux subsystem for timeless computing. So you tow it with you forward through time. And then I give a last chance because this will in fact replace your Ubuntu. I explain how you could be taking other more common routes and how this goes a bit against the status quo, but is very much worth it. It explains how it takes you to real automation and not this kind of automation that everyone gets stuck at, sitting there pressing the button to run a task. And then following that, I explain how I take you through real Linux terminal and journaling and Vim and all that happy stuff. And there's your last chance. You hit that, and now it's installing for real. Again, there's a little bit of a time delay because what's going on in the background is yet another Ubuntu install. And it really doesn't take that long to get Ubuntu installed over again from these container-like images that Microsoft makes. There it goes, it's done, that part of it. But now we're into the update, because after it's installed, there's this equivalent of applying the updates. Anyone who's applied the updates on Windows after a reinstall knows there's a little bit of catch-up happening. And Linux has that same thing. On this distro of Linux, we call it apt update and apt upgrade. So that's what's going on in the background right now. As soon as that's done, I switch over to installing the latest, greatest Python, which should be 3.12, but it's on release candidate 1 still, and it has a few libraries that aren't supported that I like to install right out of the gate, namely pandas. So I want to make really sure that the third-party library support is there for when I switch this from 3 3.11 Python to 3.12 Python. That's coming in the near future. And I try and make the installer as useful as it can be each time it gets up to one of these major things that it's installing. There's not much I really want to tell you about the apt update and apt upgrade that's going on here, which is one of the longer processes. So it does take a minute here to get through this. If you haven't read the opening chapter to Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, this would be a good time to do so, because this takes about 10 minutes. There we go with Python. Have you ever had difficulty getting the latest Python or controlling which version of Python you're using? Just rerun this script to upgrade to the latest. And that's a great thing about this whole approach. These scripts that I run out here, this one here, it can be run over and over. And even once you get into Linux and have your work going and have a few things going on, you can just keep upgrading stuff by just running this script. Which is why I have this left out, so you can always get the latest of this. And your data files, your notebooks, your configurations, what have you, are actually preserved and kept safe between these upgrades because they are kept on the Windows side. So we're on a type of Linux called a Debian derivative, a Debian distribution. Ubuntu is made from Debian. And on those versions of Linux, there is a repository system, a way to get software called the Debian Package Management System, but nobody calls it that. The program that's used to interface with it is called apt. So we often apt install, apt update. And there's about 60,000 free packages in there. It's like a web store or an app store, but it's just all free and open source stuff. So it's grabbing a few things out of there. Namely, I'm grabbing the text editor NeoVim, a improved version of Vim, and I'm grabbing the Google Chrome browser, and enough to do Linux graphics with that browser. So even though I advocate this whole approach as a way to do command line work, the command line interface, CLI, the Linux terminal, the Linux shell, what have you, when there are things that happen with graphics in Linux, this supports that. They'll pop up as, full graphics Linux interfaces if it's that kind of software, as it does with Chrome, which is especially useful for the kind of work I do with these types of systems, which involves a lot of web-based authentication that really can't be done easily without a browser. So it's a Linux script you're making. You need authentication on the Linux side. The Linux browser pops up long enough for you to get that authentication, to bank the little bit of data you need to have in your app, and to let the browser go away again. Now here we are on the pip installs. It's yet another web store type thing. Just like you can apt install, you can pip install. But whereas apt is geared towards things on the higher level, it's packages for the operating system in general, Linux apps. Pip is packages for the Python environment. So technically it's called the Python Packaging Index, or PyPy, P-Y-P-I. So when you pip install, it's coming from PyPy. And, I'm getting the minimum necessary here in order to do some data science type things. Again, pandas is the must-have package in this category. I actually have a debugging mode of this whole thing so you can see all these things getting installed in front of you. Here's Node.js, something I'd really rather not include with all of this, but a lot of the work I do has to do with browser automation. So we include this because it's necessary for some of the browser automation. Now finally, JupyterLab being installed, the star of the show. Your transition plan to the world of Linux while on Windows through Python. Sounds a bit counterintuitive, but I'll show you a tiny little piece of it before I wrap up this video, which will be in a moment because we are near the end. Congratulations! mycause.ai RealOS has landed. Oh my fur and whiskers, to JupyterLab I go. Password is foo. Okay, let's do that. Oh, look, some icons. Let's click on this one here. Password is foo. Oh, will you look at that? One of the first things I do is go into settings and switch it from this bright theme to Jupyter Dark. I just find this much easier to look at. I'll make it a little bit larger. And you can see we've got these 3 repos that have been made available here at your service, including your service. But we are going to go into intro, and to prove to you that this is Linux, I'm going to go into this Linux proof. I'll do a few of these imports and show the system platform. Oh, it is Linux. System version. Oh, it's Python 3.11.4, pretty new Python. What's our home directory? /home/Ubuntu. What's our executable? There's the Python in a virtual env location. We'll talk about that more later. It's our file separator. Oh, it's this nice /. We're in the land of /, not backslashes. And there's a whole bunch of environment variables, the very standard variables for running this in a very cloud-like way. So all your code is Python cloud compatible. You don't have to do all these convolutions to get your code running in the cloud. And if you're wondering about, the details of the Linux you're on, you can see here's Ubuntu 22.04.3, long-term service release, code named Jammy Jellyfish. Jammy. You can see it's like a Debian distro, and so on and so on. So just in case you weren't convinced this is actually Linux that you're running your Python in, here it is. And so we can just do a hello world in there, right? New notebook. This is a Python hello world program. Well, here's Python hello world in Jupyter. All you have to do is go hello world, because Jupyter handles inserting an implied print statement if it's the last line of the code block. Here's a more traditional hello world program in Python. So there, I just did hello world twice. And this is a way of running Jupyter now that just is so much better than these other approaches like Anaconda or Desktop JupyterLab, because this is not a Windows exe here. All your slashes are /, and all your code is cloud compatible, meaning, able to scale, and your knowledge is future-proofed, and all kinds of lovely stuff. So that's part 2 of getting mycause.ai installed. You just close out of that, which is an interesting thing because you can always just go back into it and it'll pick you up right where it left off because it is running invisibly in the background. Oh, well, I guess it didn't auto-save that. But here's this having run. Maybe I just didn't give it enough time for the autosave. But here we will open up the Linux shell as our final thing to show you a few things. To see how JupyterLab runs invisibly, type screen.ls. So here's the task for JupyterLab that's running Linux-side. And then here's a task for your service that I'm going to teach people how to step in and take control of as a way of moving to 24/7 Linux services from 24/7 Linux services from Jupyter notebooks, which are really easy to make. A reminder about how to get to Jupyter, and to begin your Vim, NeoVim experience, type Vim Tutor. So you can type Vim Tutor and start to learn all about that lovely stuff, or I can just show you Vimit. Is that Vimit? I think it's just Vimit. Here's the blogging system that I have here ready to go. And I'll be teaching you how to keep one text file for life for your journaling system. Here's my little macro to start a new journal entry. And hello world. I can journal for life and learn tech in a way that resists obsolescence and helps to future-proof your skills. I guess that's a good place to end. See you soon.